The yelp of my daughter's golden retriever split the sun. My daughter's sobs tore into me, but before I could even sprint down the steps, another figure stormed past me. My brother Jack, who had been inside unpacking gear, moved like a storm unleashed. Jack wasn't just family, was an ex-Navy SEAL, broad-shouldered, sharp-eyed, and trained to handle men who thought intimidation was power. "Let go of the dog," Jack's voice thundered, sharp enough to freeze the whole yard. The two men flinched, their grip on Buddy slackening. Buddy whimpered, scrambling back toward my daughter. Karen sneered, her jowls trembling with rage. "Who do you think you are? These men are HOA security. They enforce our rules. That dog's a nuisance and a danger." Jack stepped between my daughter and the thugs, his presence alone a wall they couldn't climb. His voice dropped low, dangerous. "I've stared down men with rifles bigger than you. You touch my niece's dog again, and you'll regret it." The crowd that had gathered on the cul-de-sac gasped. Phones rose, cameras flashing red dots as neighbors recorded every second. Karen, seeing the phones, tried to double down. She waved her clipboard like a badge. "This is legal enforcement action. He's resisting the HOA, arrest him." But Jack's laughter, cold and sharp, cut her theatrics to pieces. He pointed to the polos the men wore, embroidered with crooked lettering. HOA police. Not badges, not licenses, just costumes. "These aren't cops. They're imposters." "Which means what you just ordered," he said, stepping closer, his voice like a blade, "is assault." The two men shifted uneasily, one dropping his grip on a cheap baton hanging from his belt. My wife had already dialed 911, her voice carrying clear as she described fake officers assaulting a family dog under HOA direction. Karen's face drained of color, her bravado slipping for the first time. But before she could retreat, Jack leaned in close, his voice a growl that only the cameras and the crowd could hear. "You wanted a show of power? Now you've got one. Let's see how far that clipboard takes you against the law." The wail of sirens cut through the tension like thunder rolling over a battlefield. Real police cruisers screeched into the cul-de-sac, officers piling out with sharp, practiced movements. Karen's scream pierced the air, desperate now. "Arrest them. They resisted the HOA police. That dog is vicious." But her shrill voice cracked against the calm authority of a deputy who strode straight past her, toward Jack and my daughter. "Sir, are you okay? Ma'am, is the child safe?" Jack nodded once, standing tall but composed, his training visible in every controlled breath. My daughter clung to Buddy, sobbing into his fur, safe but trembling. The officers turned on Karen, their questions blunt. "Ma'am, who are these men? What jurisdiction do you think you had to authorize force against this family's animal?" Karen stammered, pointing wildly. "They're HOA security. We have full authority." The officer's brows furrowed. "Ma'am, there is no such thing as HOA police. What you've described is impersonation of law enforcement and assault. Both are felonies." The cul-de-sac erupted in gasps. Phones zoomed closer, capturing Karen's face as her world collapsed. Karen shrieked, thrashing as the officers moved toward her. "This is a conspiracy. You're all against me. I run this neighborhood." But her words sounded hollow, desperate, unraveling in the face of truth. One officer cuffed the two imposters, their heads bowed, their bravado gone. Another read Karen her rights as she flailed, screaming that property values would plummet, that the neighborhood needed her. But the only thing that plummeted that day was her illusion of power. Jack stood beside me, his arm around my daughter, his eyes steady as the cruisers pulled away with Karen wailing in the back seat. "You didn't have to do a thing," he said softly, his gaze fixed on the neighbors still filming. "She exposed herself. All I did was stand in her way long enough for the truth to catch up." The courtroom was already packed before the bailiff even called Karen's case. The buzz of whispered conversations ricocheted off the paneled walls. The weight of years of intimidation finally lifted into the light. This wasn't just about Buddy, the golden retriever my daughter nearly lost that afternoon. It was about a neighborhood held hostage by a woman who thought a title gave her more power than the law itself. Karen waddled into the courtroom, her swollen pride masked by a navy blazer 2 sizes too small, her face painted with a smirk that didn't reach her eyes. The two imposters she had called HOA police trailed behind her in shackles, their heads bowed. She still tried to strut, chin high, but you could see it in her eyes. Fear had found her at last. The prosecutor didn't waste words. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," she began, her voice firm. "This case is about abuse of power. The defendant, Karen Whitaker, not only authorized two men to impersonate law enforcement, but ordered them to assault a family pet and intimidate a child. This is not leadership. This is criminality disguised as authority." She gestured to the screen where footage from neighbors' phones began to play. Karen shrieking, the thugs yanking Buddy by the collar, my daughter's cries, and then Jack me brother storming into frame with the controlled fury of a man who had seen battlefields. The jury flinched as Karen's own words echoed from the speakers. "Teach that mutt a lesson." Karen's attorney tried to object, claiming the video was taken out of context. The judge silenced him with a glare. "The context is clear, counselor." Then the twist dropped like a bomb. The prosecution called Officer Hale, the county investigator assigned after Karen's arrest. He revealed that the HOA police wasn't a one-off stunt. Karen had quietly built a network of imposters, hiring unlicensed men to patrol the streets, find residents, and intimidate families. Over 2 years, she had collected tens of thousands in bogus fees, funneling the money into a private account. The room erupted in gasps. Neighbors shook their heads in disbelief, some muttering curses under their breath. The prosecutor continued, her voice sharp. This was not about protecting a neighborhood. This was racketeering. This was organized fraud under the guise of community management. When it was my turn to testify, I kept my voice steady though my chest burned with anger. I described Buddy's yelp, my daughter's tears, the sight of Karen standing smug while our dog was attacked. I held up the vet bill we paid afterward. Buddy had been bruised but survived. My daughter, trembling but determined, insisted on speaking too. She stood at the witness stand, her small voice carrying across the hushed courtroom. "Buddy never hurt anyone. He's my best friend." And she tried to take him away from me. Tears filled half the gallery. Even the court reporter wiped her eyes. Then Jack took the stand. His presence filled the room like a storm cloud, calm but charged. "I've seen war zones," he said, his voice low and steady. "But I've never seen anything as disgraceful as a supposed leader ordering men to assault a child's pet. That day, I didn't act as a soldier. I acted as an uncle." His words struck deeper than any legal argument. The jury nodded, their faces grim. Karen finally testified in her own defense, and it was her undoing. She screamed about property values, about ungrateful neighbors, about how she had to keep order. When pressed about the fake police, she insisted, "If the county won't do their job, I have to." The jury recoiled at her arrogance. The judge cut her off mid-rant. "Ma'am, you are not above the law. You never were." The verdict was swift and unanimous. Guilty on all counts: impersonation of law enforcement, animal cruelty, harassment, fraud, and racketeering. The judge's gavel fell like thunder. "This court sentences you, Karen Whitaker, to 7 years in state prison. Furthermore, this HOA is dissolved effective immediately. Its assets will be seized to pay restitution to every resident defrauded." The gallery erupted in cheers. Some neighbors clapped, others cried, many hugged each other with relief. My daughter squeezed Buddy's leash in triumph as he wagged his tail, blissfully unaware of the role he had played in toppling an empire of fear. Karen was dragged from the courtroom in cuffs, her shrieks echoing down the hall. "You'll regret this. You need me." But no one needed her anymore. Her clipboard, once her weapon, now lay forgotten on the courtroom floor. The weeks that followed were like waking from a nightmare. Without Karen's shadow, the neighborhood came alive again. Families who had hidden behind drawn blinds began hosting cookouts. Children played without fear of citations. Gardens bloomed wild with color, free from fines. And at the center of it all was Buddy, bounding through yards like a furry symbol of victory. My daughter laughed freely again, her fear replaced by pride. One evening, neighbors gathered in our backyard, stringing lights across the fence, music drifting through the warm air. They presented Jack with a plaque they had carved from oak. Here stood the line, and he held it. He tried to wave it off, grinning sheepishly, but tears filled his eyes as the crowd cheered. My daughter hugged him tight, whispering, "You saved Buddy." For Jack, a man haunted by wars he never talked about, those words seemed to heal something deep inside. As the night wore on, I stood on the porch watching neighbors laugh and eat together. The HOA was gone. The fraud exposed. The fear dissolved. What rose in its place was something far stronger, a true community, bound not by rules and fines, but by trust and resilience. Karen thought she could command with lies, that fake cops and threats could hold us hostage. Instead, she forged her own downfall. And in her collapse, we found our voices. So I'll leave you with this. Was Karen's prison sentence enough for the damage she caused? Or should people who abuse power so brazenly face even harsher justice for the lives they tried to control?